sports fans, and welcome to the Heavy Hitters Podcast, the ultimate destination for your weekly dose of sports excitement with co-host Darnell Duff.
Now it's Sandvin, right point with it, left circle, Paul wants it, fires it, scores! Ashton Paul, welcome to Dauphin!
And co-host Jeff Henson.
Williams, blue line, shot, rebound! Oh, you hit! Score! Score! Morgan McLean! The Storm are AJHL champions!
Whether you're into goals, touchdowns, three-pointers, or home runs, we've got it all covered. We're here to bring you the latest updates, witty commentary, and a whole lot of sports love. So, whether you're tuning in from the sidelines or the comfort of your own couch, get ready for a fast-paced ride through the world of sports. Strap in, because it's game time on the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
Hello there. Welcome back. Episode number 7. This is now a converted touchdown. My name is Duffy, Darnell Duff. Always a pleasure to be joined by Henny, Jeff Henson. Jeff, I wasn't able to sleep last night because we're swinging for the fences. We talked about heavy hitting. We're hitting pretty heavy here today.
Oh my God, I'm looking forward to this. A little later on, do we want to say the name yet? I guess we kind of can because we've already been promoting it on social media and such like that. But yeah, Jack Michaels, voice of the Edmonton Oilers, coming and joining us here on the Heavy Hitters Podcast this week. I'm looking forward to it. Got a chance to listen to him lots when I was living in Alberta. Really like his play-by-play, and now a chance to get to know Jack Michaels, the man, a little more here on our show today.
I'm all giddy. Honestly, giving me goosebump vibes, and a lot of goosebump vibes over the past couple of weeks. We're talking junior hockey to start things off, Western Hockey League. First, though, I want to talk about a series that you and I were involved with that perhaps isn't getting the recognition that it deserves, because ever since it happened, no one seems to be talking about it anymore. But it was literally a history-making event as the Dauphin Kings and the Blizzard Junior A Hockey Club in round number 1 of their first round series. Game 2 went in overtime. Game 4 went into double overtime. Game 6, facing elimination, the Kings tied up the game with 54 seconds left. And then we heard this.
As we are well into overtime number 5 here now at Credit Union Place tonight, and still doesn't look like... Scores! Caden Glover! And we are going to the pole! In quintuple overtime, the Kings win a face-off, and Caden Glover ends this game. Cole Sheffield makes 71 saves.
Amazing. I mean, we laughed. It was funny because we did that exactly 1 week ago after we taped, or the same evening that we taped our last edition here of the Heavy Hitters Podcast. We taped it, went to the hockey arena, and called that 5 overtime game that same evening. And I remember talking about calling a triple overtime game and how exhausted I was and how exhausted the players were after something like that. Hard to believe we then went through a 5 overtime game that evening. And to top things off, 2 nights later, you call a triple overtime game number 7. And I remember as well, too, from last week's podcast, how bringing up that triple overtime game that I called was a series eliminator for one of the teams that was involved in that game, and how heartbreaking it had to have been. It had to have been just demoralizing coming home from the paw that Wednesday night for the players to have gone through not just the entire series, but in particular that triple overtime Game 7, only to have their season come to an end.
Absolutely. Devastating for the players, and also selfish a little bit on my accord. Tough that another season has come to an end. But just as we look back at the series, and I truly do think it is a shame that no one seems to be talking about it anymore other than Kings fans. But the Manitoba Junior Hockey League really isn't talking about it. And I know things have to progress, things have to move forward, but come on. 5 overtime game in Game 6 and then a triple overtime game in Game 7. More than 140 minutes were played in game number 6. It started at 7:30, did not end until Caden Glover scored that winner at 12:58
a.m. It was Tuesday morning when that game finally ended.
5.5 hours.
Yeah.
And fans were still in the stands. It was awesome to see the canteen actually closed in the third period, which was
hilarious.
Yeah, which was unfortunate because I know guys were looking for some Gatorade. But I went back through the history books and I go back to 2007, a game between the Toronto Junior Canadiens in the Ontario Junior Hockey League. They went up against the Pickering Panthers. Ironically enough, the Panthers beat the Kings at the Centennial Cup a couple of years ago in Estevan at Affinity Place. But they played a game in 2007, Game 2 of their series, went 154 minutes and 32 seconds. Another one last year in the Provincial Junior Hockey League in Ontario went into 5 overtimes. It ended just before 1 a.m. in a 5-4 defeat. You talk about heartbreak. Back at the Royal Bank Cup in 2007, Prince George Spruce Kings beat the Camrose Kodiaks in 5 overtimes.
I remember that game.
I'm sure you would, of course.
Yeah, I remember that one. A good friend of mine and a guy we'll probably have on the show at some point down the road here, Bruce Barker, who was the play-by-play voice for the Camrose Kodiaks when they played that game. And a couple of years later, I had the opportunity, Camrose hosted the Royal Bank Cup that year, in 2011 it was, and we were previewing a semifinal game that was going to be between the Kodiaks and the Pembroke Lumber Kings, who were coached at that time by now Toronto Maple Leafs head coach Sheldon Keefe. And I remember mentioning towards the end of it that I thought it was going to be a great game, going to be a really close game. And I said, don't be surprised if this game ends up going to overtime. Oh, could you hear the grumbles that were coming from the Camrose fans as soon as I mentioned the word overtime associated to an RBC Cup game? They're still hurting over that one, and that was 2000. That was 4 years earlier to that.
Now, I mentioned Cole Sheffield made 71 saves in the game. They updated them after. He made 91 saves through Instat. Thomas Anderson of the Blizzard made 77. The expected goals for were 5.12 for the Kings and 7.11 for the Blizzard. Chances galore.
Yep.
And just to think how hard these guys have to work. And I gained a lot of respect for these two teams and the coaching staff and the players specifically, because you come into town in September, you prepare to make the team. Once you make the team, you work out every day. You're on the ice every day. You're practicing. You're traveling. A ton of travel on the bus, late nights, early mornings. I got a lot of respect for how hard these guys work to hone their craft. And I mean, it's just amazing stuff. And to be a part of 4 overtime games in one series, and one being a 5, and then Game 7 in triple overtime, I just feel like there's some pretty cool things here to talk about when it comes to maybe TSN or Sportsnet that you could talk about this series, because it truly was history making.
Yeah, and nothing as of yet. I mean, we'll see maybe if once the hockey season over that somebody decides to jump on this. But yeah, 7 full overtime periods and then another 4 partial periods of overtime in that series. Just I've never experienced anything like that at all. I know you certainly haven't experienced anything like that. And I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again. I'm sure there'll be a long overtime game at some point.
5?
But 5, and then follow it up with a 3 2 nights later.
That's crazy. And a bus travel.
Yep.
In between. Man, that's wild. Just crazy stuff, cool stuff, heartbreaking of a loss, but some other cool notes around the junior hockey landscape. Going over to the Western Hockey League, Landon DuPont, just 14 years of age right now. He is the second player in Western Hockey League history and just the 9th in Canadian Hockey League history to be given exceptional status, which means he'll be in the WHL as a full-time player next year as a 15-year-old.
Well,
unreal.
The Everett Silvertips are just licking their chops. So they get the first overall pick in this year's WHL draft and have the chance to draft Landon. Hard to believe he's only the second guy in the history of the Western Hockey League to be granted exceptional status. Of course, Connor Bedard, the only other guy that has had that status bestowed upon him. I was even surprised to learn that Gavin McKenna hadn't been given exceptional status going into his WHL career. Now, just watching what he did this past season as a 16-year-old, finishing just a mere point, a couple points back of what Connor Bedard did as a 16-year-old during his Western Hockey League career. So very curious to see how DuPont is going to do with the Everett Silvertips as early as this coming fall.
So as a 14-year-old playing for Edge Prep School, obviously in Alberta, he had 19 goals and 43 points, so 62 points in the regular season and 5 goals and 11 assists in the playoffs for 16 points from the back end. So this guy, obviously, he is an exceptional player. And you look at the company he is joining, including Jonathan Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, Connor McDavid, among the 9 exceptional status. How much pressure, though, Jeff, do you think this puts on Landon, or do you think maybe he's ready to seize the moment?
First off, I think the pressure is going to be a little less because he's playing in Everett. Can you imagine what the pressure would be like if he was playing in a Canadian market?
Wouldn't that be so cool?
It would be cool, but that'd be a massive a lot of pressure on him if that was the case. So I think some of that pressure is going to be alleviated a bit with playing in Everett this upcoming season and such. Without knowing the kid, though, personally, I guess each person handles it differently. So it'd be curious to see how he does handle pressure like that. As a defenseman, I guess you got to be a little more cool under pressure and such like that. So I'm sure all of that was taken into account. I'm sure they've talked to coaches and such about what his character is like, what he's like as a 14-year-old, and they have to go through all of this before, obviously, he's able to be granted exceptional status. And obviously, the people within the WHL and Hockey Canada and such, that whoever made that decision were happy with what they learned about him to grant him that status.
And when you talk about having someone to look up to, someone maybe that has gone through the grind, gone through those pressure situations, look no further than in his household. His dad, Mickey DuPont, 259 Western Hockey League games, played 356 games in the American Hockey League. He's played in the National Hockey League, Spangler Cup in Germany as well. He's now coaching the U15 team at Edge Prep. But another question for you, Jeff, with how good players are these days at a really young age. I look at Jackson Jacobson of the Brandon Wheat Kings. He just helped the team advance to the TELUS Cup. In the regular season, he started as a 14-year-old this year, going up against guys who are as old as 18. He had 37 goals and 69 assists. In playoffs in 9 games, when things get tougher, he had 23 points, 12 goals. I look at Prav Batal of Winnipeg, who's getting some pretty cool limelight. He's only 14. He had 119 points in 32 games of U15, played U17 where he had some success, and even had some success as a 14-year-old at the U18 level. So with how good these young guys are at such a young age, there's only 9 right now that have been granted exceptional status. Do we think that's gonna bloat and become a lot more here moving forward?
I don't think it will. I don't think it honestly will. I was going to mention about Batal in that, and I'm guessing he must be eligible for this year's WHL draft, I'm thinking. So how would you like that, 119 points or something like that in 32 games, and you're not even going to be the first overall pick in your draft because there's another kid.
Tough picking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whoever's got the number 2 pick is probably pretty happy as well, too. Maybe not as happy as they would have been if they could get Dupont, but to get a kid like Pertal as well, that's going to be pretty awesome for them. But yeah, I don't think we'll see a huge blow up with regards to guys getting exceptional status. I think it's, the criteria you've got to meet, and it's just, a lot of undertaking goes into deciding who gets exceptional player status and such like that. And you've got to be a very, very, very special hockey player. You listed some of the names already that have gone on and had exceptional status and have what they've done NHL-wise. The likes of McDavid and Bedard and Ekblad, Tavares, just to name 4 of the guys. And now we put Dupont in that class there. I don't think it's something that's going to be played with. I think it's something that, there'll definitely be more people applying for it, but I think there's going to continue to be a very cautious approach as to who exactly they give this exceptional status to.
And would it not look bad on not only the Western Hockey League, but perhaps the Canadian Hockey League? This is prestigious.
Yep.
Being granted exceptional status, that is above and beyond. I mean, you talk about Gavin McKenna. He wasn't even given exceptional status, but he is an exceptional player.
Exactly.
So I think you're teetering on a pretty tight line if you're the Canadian Hockey League.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why you got to continue to be very selective when it comes to giving guys exceptional status and make sure that these guys are deserving. I mean, if you can't consider exceptional status for a guy like Gavin McKenna, who set all kinds of records at the Canada Games that he participated in a few years ago and has done some amazing things in his minor hockey career, that speaks very highly as to just how exceptional this exceptional player status is and how coveted and much guarded it is.
I'm all giddy. Let's do this. Let's take a break. Let's come back with the voice of the Edmonton Oilers, Jack Michaels. We're heavy hitting here on the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
The Heavy Hitters Podcast returns in just a moment with Duffy and Henny. Do you have a heavy-hitting topic that you want the boys to chat about? Hit them up on Twitter at It's the Duffy One, JHenson73, or send a message to the Heavy Hitters Podcast Facebook page. And in the meantime, enjoy the show with Duffy and Henny.
Welcome back to the Heavy Hitters Podcast. Now pleased to be joined by the voice of the Edmonton Oilers, Jack Michaels. Jack, first of all, I want to really thank you for joining the podcast today. And I want to kick things off. I know we have lots to chat about over the next a little bit of your time, but just talk about a little bit about your career and take us to, the young days and how you got into this wonderful broadcasting industry.
Well, I don't want to eat up all the time on your podcast because, as you can imagine, it's a bit of a long and winding road. But, I will say that, like anyone else, I in this business, I probably had some visions of being an athlete at one point. And then, I think those of us in the broadcasting media or print or otherwise industry eventually realize that those dreams are not going to come to fruition. So we look for the next best thing, and that's to stay involved, in and around the periphery of sports. And I'll be the first to admit that I'm very similar to George Costanza in the sense that if it's not about sports, I have trouble concentrating. So, a profession in this industry was always of something that was of interest to me. And, I was on the air my first week freshman year at Ithaca College. I got a morning sportscast and did all kinds of play-by-play throughout my 4 years at Ithaca. Everything from, women's soccer and lacrosse to field hockey to, men's and women's basketball. I did some football, did some baseball, did club hockey, did a little Cornell hockey, and really, just kind of plied my trade and came out of college thinking I'd set the world on fire, and of course ended up back in my hometown working for minimum wage, which at that point was $4.25 an hour, and doing play-by-play on the side for $75 a game. High school football and basketball and small college football, basketball, and baseball. I covered wrestling tournaments. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So, you just get in the reps, you put in the time, and you hope for a break. And mine came with minor pro hockey out in Colorado Springs, and then on up to Anchorage, Alaska, before I got the Edmonton job in 2010. So I'm one of the few people you probably know that moved south to Edmonton.
Jack, you come to Edmonton and you replace a guy, a legend, a Hockey Hall of Famer in the form of Rod Phillips, a guy who had been with the Oilers since almost day one in their days in the Western Hockey or the World Hockey Association. For yourself coming into Edmonton, how important was it for you to set your own identity as a voice of the Edmonton Oilers? And, I'm sure you wanted to pay homage and respect to Rod and the work that he did before that. But how important was it for you to kind of be your own guy and to have your own ways that you called games for the Oilers?
Well, I think you just answered your own question. I mean, that's all you can do, because you don't replace a guy like Rod Phillips. You're simply the next guy. You're not going to replace the voice of an entire generation, and he was there from day one. I mean, he's the only guy who'd ever called games for the Edmonton Oilers before I joined the club. 38-year career, as you said, Hall of Famer. You're not going to replace that. You're simply next man up. That's it. And I think, I relied on an old proverb that you hear in the southeast part of the United States a lot. When you're invited to the biggest dance of the year, you dance with who brung you. And what I always interpreted that to mean is, stick with what got you here. Don't try to pay homage to anybody. Don't try to be someone you're not. Apply the skills and present the games in the manner that, earned you the job. And that's the only way I ever really looked at it is, why would I change, what got me this opportunity? I mean, quite frankly, Edmonton had never hired for the position before, and no Canadian team had ever employed an American play-by-play person before. So why would I change what got me the job? So, and you had to understand that, they could have hired anybody. They could have hired Chris Cuthbert, and he wouldn't have been Rod Phillips. There was going to be an adjustment period no matter what. So to be honest with you, I think that actually, bought me some time and currency with the Edmonton populace, is that, look, no one was going to replace Rod. No one, no matter who they brought in here, there was going to be an adjustment period. And I think to be honest with you, I think I benefited from that to some degree where, hey, let's give this guy some time and maybe we'll grow to like him. And, 14 years later, my key fob still works. So, obviously some things have gone right. And I've always been real appreciative of that. I think people were open to a new style, a new voice, a new way of doing things. And I think part of that is because they knew there would never be another Rod Phillips. So once you come to grips with that as a fan, I think you're pretty open to a guy as long as he does his homework, is well prepared, and tries to convey what's going on in the most enthusiastic manner possible. I mean, at the end of the day, this is also entertainment as well as sport. It's, we're not on C-SPAN. We're not, talking life or death here. We're talking about, a sport and really part of the fabric of the community that makes this community tick and tick in an entertainment type of way. So, let's have some fun with it. Let's convey the atmosphere inside the building and let's bring it to the people in the most enthusiastic manner possible. And I think over time, if you show that passion and show you're committed to the city, live in the city, participate in the city's activities, I think people are going to be open-minded and ultimately you'll win a decent chunk of them over. But the one thing you have to understand is, in this business, not everyone's going to like you. So you just have to do it your way and hope the majority rules, I guess.
We're speaking with Jack Michaels, the play-by-play voice for the Edmonton Oilers. Jack, who were some guys that you looked up to and who were kind of maybe your role models as broadcasters growing up?
Well, I mean, I had Mike Lang in terms of hockey, who was another Hall of Fame NHL voice who just retired a couple of years ago as the longtime voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was immensely popular in my, part of the country. He was, in a very real sense, our Rod Phillips, if you want to make that analogy. And, he was like Rod, first class away from the booth as much as in the booth. And I had the privilege of, being a colleague of Mike's for 10 or 11 years before he did retire. And he was just as nice to me as a colleague as he was when I was an aspiring NHL play-by-play guy. So, it meant a lot to me to have a guy like that to look up to. I think that, ultimately, when I look at other broadcasters, Dave Johnson, who used to call the Triple Crown races and horse racing on ABC, I did have some exposure to Bob Cole, and no one will ever have a better voice than Bob Cole. You talk about natural pipes and talent. Bob Cole's voice is just, it's just perfect. People don't realize that, part of this business is luck of the draw. You either have a great voice or you don't, and no one will have a greater voice than Bob Cole. And obviously, guys, the guys I grew up watching football with. Summerall and Madden, and to kind of, I always say this, but in terms of the entertainment value, you go back and watch some of those old WWF matches, and boy, Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body, never more entertaining duo than those two. So really, as you can tell, it was a blend of guys that I thought, had a lot of fun doing what they do. And that's the biggest thing is, I think, over time, that's the message you want to convey, is that, in the real, grand scheme of things, I'm in the toy store of life as far as what I do for a living. It's a job, but only because I guess, at some point you have to choose an occupation. I think I'm pretty fortunate to do what I do for a living.
So, Jack, you get to watch one of the best players in the world, and Connor McDavid, just to name one player, on a day-by-day basis. So it was a tough start for the team. Jay Woodcroft was fired when you guys went 3-9-1, and you were 13-15-1 before the team went on a 16-game winning streak that was ultimately ended with a loss to the Vegas Golden Knights. You guys were one game away from tying the Pittsburgh Penguins. But what changed, Jack? I know so many people are wondering. You guys got off to that slow start, but then went on an all-time heater. What changed for the club, and what was it like going through that, calling games and win after win after win?
Well, first of all, you were, as a broadcaster for the team, 18 games into the year with 5 wins and sitting in 30th place in the NHL. You were legitimately wondering what the heck's going on. Too much talent for that to continue. And I did think the team would come back. I didn't necessarily think they'd rip off 16 in a row. But, this team has a lot of talent. I think it's one of a handful of 6 or 7 teams that have a legitimate chance at raising the cup in June. So I always knew they were going to go to the playoffs. I knew they'd figure it out whether they made the coaching change or not. But the one thing Chris Knobloch did is he just calmed everything down. He lowered the temperature right away. He basically said what I was saying is just, hey guys, we're too good of a team for this to continue any longer. Let's just get to work and slowly we'll pull out of this. We're good enough that, we'll start getting a few breaks and start putting some wins together and everything's going to be fine. And he also simplified things on the ice. For example, the penalty kill, which, like the rest of the club, was just a disaster in the first 12 or 13 games. I think there was something like 23 or 24 different penalty killing combinations. And he basically just started using the same 3 pairs of forwards and the same set of 4 D-men and allowed the penalty kill to kind of work its way out of it and just simplified things. And that sounds like coaches speak, but Chris Knobloch, if you pay attention, he has that kind of demeanor where he is as advertised. He is a calm guy. He is not a guy that's going to overreact to things when things go sideways. And when he arrived upon the scene, he just basically said to the players, look, you're too good. You're too good for this to continue much longer. I'm not going to get in your way. I'm going to allow you to just play, and the results will take care of themselves. I'm not going to change it. You said what changed. I think what changed is what didn't change. Is there weren't radical trades. There wasn't, cutting of ice time. There wasn't, an overreaction to everything. It was just like, look, guys, look at our roster. Let's just figure this out. Let's just start playing and relax and understand that there's still 65 games left to play. And, if we win 5 of our next 8, and we do that another 4 or 5 times, we're going to be in the playoffs. Just go 5-3. And I think by keeping the picture small, keeping the roster intact, and there were some things. Obviously, Jack Campbell was sent down, and Calvin Pickard came up and has had a great year as the number 2 guy at 12-6. He's worked beautifully with Stuart Skinner. He's played well. He gets along with everybody. So there were some tweaks, obviously. You added Corey Perry, a few games into that run you're talking about, and he added a veteran presence and moxie, not to mention physicality and toughness to the middle six as well as production. So, there were some additions, but I really think just lowering the temperature and not – it's like the Tommy Boy, like don't choke the life out of the dinner roll. Like just butter it gently, and over time it'll taste pretty good. And I honestly think that's what Chris did more than anything, is lower the temperature immediately surrounding the club. Everyone else was still freaking out from the outside, but I think inside the dressing room, his natural belief in the roster and him just looking at the percentages and saying, guys, this can't last forever, I think it calmed the whole situation down.
Jack, one of my most memorable calls from your play-by-play days here with the Oilers has to be from a couple seasons ago when Connor McDavid literally walked through all 5 New York Rangers from the blue line in and scored just an incredible goal at Rogers Place. Do you still get amazed and surprised sometimes at some of the things that guys like McDavid and Leon Draisaitl can do, or is it now just almost like a commonplace that when they do an amazing play like that, well, that's just McDavid or Draisaitl for you?
Well, I have to fight that impulse. I think it's a good point you bring up. It's part of my job to keep saying, look, this is still magnificent and amazing. I can't allow it to be commonplace. Simply because I see it all the time. But I'm sure if you analyze things closely, there's probably a couple of goals. I can think of one that he scored against Anaheim, McDavid did, where I guess, looking back on it now, my reaction would have been, I guess, restrained as compared to maybe how if that had been earlier in his career. But it's also time and situation. I think, the goal that he scored against the Rangers was a tying goal, and the Oilers were coming back from a deep deficit, and it was on Kevin Lowe's jersey retirement night. The Anaheim goal was part of an onslaught that ultimately led to a lopsided victory on a Saturday afternoon, I think. So, I do think as an announcer you have to have an awareness of time and space, just like the players do. And maybe there's a time for a reaction and maybe there's not a time for an overreaction. But you're absolutely right to point out that at times you have to remind yourself that what these two guys are doing is not mundane, is not run-of-the-mill. Leon Draisaitl just became the 14th player in the history of the league to put up 5 40-goal years to go along with 5 100-point seasons. Think about it. One of 14 guys in 105 years of NHL hockey. Not even McDavid's on that list. So, not yet, anyways. He probably will be next year, and who knows? I don't think he's getting 9 goals in the final 6 games. I think he's a question mark to play tomorrow. But the point is you're dealing with 2 guys who are putting up statistics that, literally only a couple of dozen other players have ever put up before. And by the time they're done, I think we're probably looking at single digits, and they're playing on the same team. So it is, it's a credit to them. It's a credit to their talent. And it's a stark reminder to me that I continue to have to point it out every once in a while so it doesn't become just ordinary, everyday fodder, because it's not. What I'm seeing on an everyday basis is not routine.
Jack Michaels is the play-by-play voice of the Edmonton Oilers. Jack, again, thank you so much for joining the Heavy Hitters podcast. But just one more question before we let you go. Right now, I'm currently looking at a petition that literally has tens of thousands of signatures that they want to hear you doing playoff hockey for the Oilers. Now, this sort of goes back to you're going to have people that maybe aren't a big fan. You're going to have big fans as well. So with that being said and that great petition success, how does it feel to know that Oilers fans, they want you when it comes to the big dance?
Well, I mean, it's obviously immensely gratifying to have all that kind of support. I mean, I think, I think in most markets, to be honest with you, that they prefer their announcers for playoffs and everything. I don't think I'm unique or singular in that category. What makes it a little special is the fact that, so many care. And that's Edmonton for you. I mean, it's not me that makes the situation special. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, the Oiler fans, want you." It's not even necessarily, I think, about me. I mean, I appreciate it, and it's a very nice compliment. But the Oilers just want one of their own. So I mean, that's the thing is Oiler fans just want their own. And that's what makes this city such a great place to live. Is once you're perceived as one of them. And I've lived here for 14 years. I've raised both my kids here. I think over time, if you pay close attention to the telecast, you probably know that. I make reference to my family just like anyone else would. Not often, but intermittently. So they probably have an idea that I have a wife and 2 children who've lived here with me for 14 years. So I do think I'm considered, an adopted Edmontonian, even though, I have no familial roots here. I think I am considered one of their own. And the one thing I'll say about this city is, boy, do they take care of their own. And that's what makes it unique. It's not my talent. It's just Edmonton's unique appreciation for someone that they perceive as being on their side. That's why they're defending me, and that's why they're advocating for me. It's not really my singular talents or anything like that. I just think they care about someone that they know cares about them, and that's again what makes living in this city awfully special. Is it is a city that I would say, if there's one characteristic across the city that I would say loyalty would be at the absolute top. And we felt that from really our early months here. And you know what? It's kind of a product of our geographical location. And I felt this in Anchorage, Alaska as well. As, if you want to complain about the weather or certain, climate-related activities here, they can show you where the airport is. And I appreciate that.
Well, I think, Jack, I could speak for everybody when we think of Edmonton Oilers. Of course, we think of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, but we also think of Jack Michaels. So, Jack, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. An absolute pleasure to get to know you a little bit. I know our listeners are going to really enjoy this chat. So, again, thank you so much, and all the best, and good luck to the Oilers moving forward.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for the kind words.
Get ready, folks. The Heavy Hitters podcast is about to bring the heat as Duffy and Henny return in just a moment. But here's the kicker. You can be part of the action, too. Want your voice heard on the show? Shoot the boys a message on their Heavy Hitters Facebook page with your burning question, and they'll give you a big shout-out next week when they answer it. But for now, buckle up for more heavy-hitting action with Duffy and Henny.
Jeff, honestly, I still have chills. That was so cool.
That for guys like you and me that are fighting our way through the broadcast industry and trying to work our way up to get the chance to talk to a guy like that who's gone through all of those battles just like you and I have, and has made it to the top, and is still just one of the most humble guys I've ever met. I mean, just talking to wise, I'm not going to forget this interview for a while. That was great. And big thanks to Jack Michaels for joining us today.
I might have it on loop overnight just to have good thoughts before bed and when I wake up on the morning. This is the Heavy Hitters podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, we just had the voice of the Edmonton Oilers, Jack Michaels. Don't forget, we're also on Spotify and YouTube Music as well as iHeartRadio. So So wherever you go, you could take myself and Henny with you 24/7. March Madness. The madness has come and gone for another year. Things changed on the women's side, which we'll get to in a moment. No change, I should say, on the men's side, as the Connecticut Huskies, an absolute train, 12 straight tournament victories. Of course, they won last year. This year, they beat Purdue, who thought this would be a close game. It was really tight after the first half, but the Huskies just have such great depth, of course, led by Dan Hurley, who will probably go down as one of the best coaches in college history. Some pretty amazing stuff, and for the Huskies just to dismantle their opponents as much as they did, that's just a testament to, and a cherry on top, I guess you could say, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of expected that Connecticut was going to have a good run in this tournament, and especially was going to do very well in the Final Four. Give credit to Purdue for trying to keep that game as close as possible. It was interesting listening to some of the analysts talk about this game after it was done. Obviously, Connecticut decided, well, we're going to let Zach Edey do his Zach Edey stuff. They let him, get his opportunities and such like that, and basically shut down the rest of the Boilermaker offense after that. How often do you see a game where a team scores 60 points and one guy has over half of that, 37 points? Yeah,
crazy.
Over half of the points was Zach Edey, and that still wasn't enough for the Boilermakers to win that championship. And just it shows the pedigree and the poise of that University of Connecticut lineup. And again, they've just been on an absolute heater the last 2 years here and going back to back. First time since the late 2000s when the Florida Gators won back to back NCAA championships that a school has gone back to back.
And Dan Hurley joins Billy Donovan, Coach K of Duke, and John Wooden as the only coaches dating back to 1970 that have back-to-back championships. And a big thing in sports, Jeff, so many say, one player can't win you a title. You look at Zach Edey, outstanding tournament. A lot of people are now saying he's going to be a top draft pick in the NBA draft coming up here very shortly. But you just look at that depth of Connecticut. Just going to run you through some stats, which I think are mind-boggling. For the starters, Tristan Newton, 22.4% of the shots he took, he averaged 15.1 points. Cam Spencer, 20.9%, averaged 14.3 points. Alex Caravan, 21.4%, averaged 13.3%. Donovan Clingan, who is 7'2" and was outstanding defensively on the perimeter, 24.9%, averaged 13 points. Stephen Castle, 21.4%, averaged 11.1 points. And the assist, 63.6% of baskets were assisted by Connecticut. That is just outstanding stuff, and that just goes to show, it just cements and finalizes that you need a full team to win a championship.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all you have to do, too, is look at, as we just mentioned, Purdue scores 60 points in the final. Zach Edey gets 37 of those 60 points. Where was the rest of the Purdue lineup in that game? If, they get even another guy, that maybe one other guy that steps up and has a semi-big game, we could be talking about the Boilermakers being national champions. But instead, they unfortunately, at least for that game, put all of their eggs into Zach Edey and hope that he would carry them. And, basketball is maybe the one sport where you could see one guy dominate like that, but definitely not to that extent, as the Boilermakers were hoping Zach Edey would do on Monday night. And hats off to the Huskies for their just incredible depth, as you mentioned. And it was not just the final they showed that in. Again, every game you go up and down the lineup, and everybody was contributing for UConn throughout the NCAA tournament, and deserving national champions.
So all the credit in the world goes to the defense for Connecticut. Outstanding. But Purdue's offense, as you just mentioned, went ice cold at the worst possible time. Now, throughout the season, they scored 761 points off of spot shot attempts. That's twos or threes. They had just 2 of those in the finals. They had 48 three-pointers from post up when a post gets it and passes out. They had none in the final. They were just historically cold, and it came at the worst time possible. It's not like they were not turning over the ball a ton. They only had 9 turnovers in this contest. And I mean, Zach Edey, as you mentioned, 37 points, the second most in tournament history. But you look at Connecticut, they were a plus 140 throughout the course of the tournament. That is the best, record-breaking. The next closest is Kentucky, and you got to go all the way back to 1996. Do you think, Jeff, this team goes down as one of the best in NCAA history?
I can't say how they don't go down as one of the best. Just when you list off some of those numbers, the fact that they are one of only a handful of teams that have won back-to-back championships, and you mentioned some of those teams that did it. I remember Duke doing it back in the 90s, I believe, when they had the likes of Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill. Just a great lineup there. John Wooden and that powerhouse that he had in UCLA back in the 1970s. Those are pretty good teams, but I think you got to put Connecticut, this current edition of Connecticut, up among those teams as far as the all-time greats when it comes to U.S. men's college basketball.
So great stuff when it comes to men's college basketball, and we talk about record-breaking, and perhaps it was a record-breaking season for the Connecticut Huskies, and especially at the tournament where they were a plus 140, 11 more on the plus than the Kentucky Wildcats back in 1996. But all is well and record-breaking as well. Groundbreaking, awesome stuff when it comes to the women's portion of March Madness. They drew 18.7 million viewers in the championship. That was the most watched women's basketball game of all time. This game was led by Caitlin Clark, going up against a South Carolina gauntlet led by Dawn Staley, who's one of the best coaches, if not the best coach ever when it comes to college basketball. They were looking to complete a perfect season. They were 37-0 prior to this contest. It was a close game. The Hawkeyes stuck close. But again, you just talk about the depth of South Carolina, and they finished off their 38-0 season with an 87-75 win. Just what a story, and it just goes to show that women's basketball is in a really good spot.
It certainly is, and yeah, I mean, we talked about the depth of UConn to win the men's title, but you said it there, just the depth of that South Carolina lineup. Caitlin Clark had herself just another amazing tournament and a great game in the final. She had the pieces to help her, and yet still, South Carolina's depth was even better than what Iowa had to end up winning that game. How about, you mentioned Dawn Staley, maybe one of the best coaches in women's basketball, college basketball ever. How about the comments she made after the game, basically calling Caitlin Clark the GOAT when it comes to women's college basketball?
Just heartwarming. I actually shed a tear while I was sitting down and watching that. Just such a cool. Dawn Staley did not need to do that.
Nope.
But she recognized what Caitlin Clark has done for basketball. You go back to last year when Iowa played LSU in the championship final. Nearly 10 million viewers, which is all great. But you look at this year, 18.7 million. Caitlin Clark has had such an incredible impact on basketball. It's just so great to see, but also has Dawn Staley. And a really cool story about Dawn Staley. She had to create a major at South Carolina for the upcoming season to get one of their top recruits. You talk about commitment and recruiting. Joyce Edwards, she's obviously wrapping up high school this year. She had 31 points a game, 13 rebounds a game, a perfect 5 GPA, Gatorade Player of the Year, and McDonald's All-American MVP. But the only way Staley was going to get her to South Carolina was by creating a major, and that major happens to be environmental engineering. That's just a cool story.
That is a very cool story. I mean, it shows you'll do whatever it takes to get the people that you want in your lineup, and that's the signs of a strong program and a program that's going to win year after year. They're willing to do things like that to bring in top-end talent, and that's why South Carolina, is able to go on a 37-38-0 run, is able to win national championships and such like that, and is able to be one of the top programs in the United States year in and year out.
March Madness, you were awesome, and I cannot wait for my heart to be broken again next year when the Duke Blue Devils again will likely not win a championship.
Keep the faith. It might happen.
I'll try. But March Madness always leads into another great event. The start, I know the PGA Tour has been playing for a while and live as well, but I want to call this the start of the golf season. The Masters. It starts this week. I love the Masters. If you like golf, you love the Masters. There's just something about the beauty. Everything is picturesque.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to say it's the strongest field of the year, but for the most part, you have the top golfers. Starts on Thursday morning, rolling through that green jacket. We've seen history over the years. Back in 2019, Tiger Woods, Hideki Matsuyama won a couple of years ago to become an ultra celebrity in Japan. And now we look forward into this year. Jon Rahm is the defending champion. There are some naysayers that he is not going to be able to get it done because he's now on Live Tour, and of course they only play 3 rounds compared to 4. The last time Rahm played a 4-round event was back on the DP World Tour back in November. Sir Nick Faldo says he's lost his intensity, or at least a lack of intensity, and he doesn't know if he has what it takes to be able to dethrone some of the top guns in a 4-round event. Do you like Jon Rahm this week?
I'm going to stick with Scottie Scheffler. I think this is Scotty's year to win the Masters once again, just considering the start that he has gotten off to this year on the PGA Tour. I think this is Scotty's year to finally put another major victory under his belt and win the Masters. I was thinking, guys like Rahm. I was thinking guys like Rory. Of course, the story everyone's going to be watching is how is Tiger going to do this weekend? He always seems to find a way to turn his game up for the Masters. Can we see a little more Tiger magic this weekend at Augusta? It's maybe not as many names being talked about going into it, but I think it's still going to be very interesting come Sunday afternoon to see who all is vying for that. And another guy, what about Brooks Koepka, Mr. Major himself? A guy that always seems to find the best parts of his game at major championships. Could this be the year that he picks up a green jacket?
So going on to Koepka, he held a 4-stroke lead last year before a 75 in the final round. He's finished top 11 in each of his last 4 Masters. And as you mentioned, he is a major champion. He comes up big in the biggest moments. He won the PGA back in 2018, 2019, and 23. He won the PGA Championship last year, which shut up a lot of the naysayers because he was on Live Tour then, and he still elevated his play for a 4-round event at the PGA Championship at Oak Hill. But you talked a little bit about Rory McIlroy. He is nearing 9 years where he has not won a major championship, arguably playing some of the best golf of his life. He's hitting it farther than he ever has. Of course, that's because technology is just going through the roof. But he could complete, as mentioned, that Grand Slam. And if he does, he's going to join the likes of Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, and Tiger Woods. He's playing really good. He seems to be dialed in, and it appears that Rory McIlroy could be destined for maybe to get that Grand Slam completed.
It'd be a great story to see if Rory could do that this weekend at Augusta. I wonder about his mental game when it comes to things like that, and can he put it together for 4 rounds at Augusta? I think if it's any other course, I like his chances a lot better. Just knowing, though, that that's the only major championship that's eluded him so far from having the career slam, and just how he, at times, finds himself in a position where, he's got a good lead going into the final round and he tends to collapse a little bit. I hope if that's a situation that comes up again this year that he can finish the job this year, but it's something that he's got to work through and he's got to play through before he can officially and finally get that last major championship he needs to get the career slam.
So the last time we saw Tiger Woods was at the Genesis Invitational. He pulled out because of an illness. Good thing it wasn't an injury, but he has recently said, and at his presser earlier this week at Augusta, that he was not ready. He also then said he believes if everything goes the way he needs it to, he still has one more in him potentially. Are you a believer or a non-believer?
I think he'll be there. I think he'll be there by Sunday. Whether or not he wins it this year, I don't know if that's the case, but I've learned you never bet against Tiger. You never bet against him when it comes to especially events like the Masters. And so, if he can find that groove early on Thursday at Augusta, look out, because he's one of those guys that could unexpectedly, I think to a lot of people, come up and be a contender by the time Sunday rolls around. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to see that red golf shirt patrolling around Augusta Sunday afternoon with just a huge flock of fans watching him.
That would be magical. Now, I think his championship window is closing. I am a big Tiger fan, though, so I hope he is in contention down the stretch on Sunday. Jeff, enjoy the azaleas, enjoy a cold pop, enjoy all that green grass, and the wonderful weekend it's about to be at Augusta National.
This is an event that, if you're any type of golf fan, you're dialed yourself in. I know our general manager here at work has already booked the entire weekend off just so he can watch the Masters on TV. So that just tells you how big of an event this is to some people out there.
And unlikely that you're going to want to reach me, Jeff, but if you do, well, I shouldn't say that. You reach out to me quite often, but if you do on Saturday and Sunday and you ask me to leave the couch, I will not, because I will be locked in for the Masters. Jeff, thank you so much, and chat with you next week.
See you guys next week.
March Madness, the Masters, junior hockey. What a time to be alive. And in the words of the one and only Jack Michaels, the pleasure has been all ours.
That's a wrap for this week on the Heavy Hitters Podcast. Don't forget to give the guys a follow on Twitter at It's the Duffy One and JHenson73. You can also keep up to date with the podcast by visiting the Heavy Hitter Podcast on Facebook. Duffy and Henny will return next week, but for now, keep it real and keep it heavy hitting.